In a small, peaceful town surrounded by lush green hills and dense forests, life moved at a slower pace. The air was always fresh, filled with the scent of pine trees and wild flowers. It wasn't the kind of place where big surprises happened often, or so everyone thought. But for Ethan Carter, a hard-working single dad in his mid-30s, life had its own way of throwing unexpected challenges his way. Ethan lived alone with his 8-year-old daughter Lila in a cozy little house on the outskirts of town. Their home wasn't fancy, but it was warm and welcoming, just like Ethan himself. He worked long hours at the local auto repair shop, fixing everything from old tractors to broken-down cars. His hands were calloused from years of work, but they were also gentle when it came to holding Lila's hand or helping her build Lego creations during their rare free time together. Lila was the light of Ethan's life, bright, curious, and full of energy. She loved riding her red bicycle around the neighborhood, exploring the woods behind their house, and asking endless questions about how things worked. Sometimes, she would tag along to Ethan's workplace, watching him tinker with engines and tools. Though he didn't have much time for hobbies, Ethan made sure to give Lila all the attention she needed. Being both mother and father to her wasn't easy, but he wouldn't trade his role as her dad for anything in the world. One rainy afternoon, as Ethan drove home after finishing up a particularly tough day at the garage, something unusual caught his eye. About halfway down the winding country road that led to their house, he spotted a camper pulled over onto the shoulder. At first glance, it looked sleek and modern, the kind of vehicle you'd expect to see parked near a luxury resort, rather than stuck on this quiet rural route. But as Ethan slowed down, he noticed smoke rising faintly from under the hood. Whoever owned this camper was clearly in trouble. Curiosity got the better of him, and Ethan decided to pull over. He grabbed his toolbox from the back seat of his truck and stepped out into the drizzle. The rain wasn't heavy, but it was enough to make the ground muddy and slick. As he approached the camper, he knocked softly on the door. After a moment, it creaked open, revealing a young woman in her late 20s. Her hair was damp and tucked messily behind her ears, and she wore a simple hoodie and jeans. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was an air of elegance about her, a quiet confidence that seemed out of place in these surroundings. "Hi," Ethan said, offering a friendly smile. "I saw your camper on the side of the road. Is everything okay?" The woman hesitated for a second before nodding slightly. "Yeah. Well, no, not really," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "It broke down a couple of hours ago. I've been trying to figure out what's wrong, but—" She trailed off, shrugging helplessly. Ethan immediately offered to take a look. "I'm pretty good with engines," he said. "Mind if I check it out?" She glanced at him warily, as though unsure whether to trust a stranger. But then she must have seen the sincerity in his eyes because she nodded again. "Sure, thanks. I'm Claire, by the way." "Ethan," he replied, already opening the hood to inspect the engine. "Nice to meet you, Claire." As Ethan began examining the problem, Claire stepped out of the camper, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. She watched him work silently, occasionally glancing at her phone, which had no signal in this remote area. There was something about her demeanor that intrigued Ethan, not just her obvious discomfort with being stranded, but also the guarded look in her eyes. She seemed tense, almost as if she were expecting someone, or something, to show up at any moment. Despite her unease, Claire couldn't help but admire Ethan's skill. He moved with practiced ease, his hands deftly identifying the issue within minutes. "Looks like the radiator hose is busted," he explained, pointing to the damaged part. "Nothing too serious, though. I can patch it up for now, but you'll need to replace it soon." Claire let out a breath of relief. "Thank goodness. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped." "No problem," Ethan replied with a grin. "Happens to the best of us." Just then, another sound interrupted their conversation. The squeak of bicycle tires cutting through the wet gravel. It was Lila who had somehow managed to track Ethan down despite the weather. She skidded to a stop beside them, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she hopped off her bike. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she asked, her bright blue eyes wide with curiosity. "This lady's camper broke down." Ethan explained, gesturing toward Claire. So I'm helping her fix it. Lila turned her gaze to Claire, studying her with the unfiltered honesty of a child. Are you lost? She blurted out. Claire chuckled softly, the tension in her shoulders easing ever so slightly. Kind of, she admitted. But your dad's making sure I'm not stuck here forever. Well, Dad's really good at fixing stuff, Lila declared proudly. He fixes everything. Ethan laughed, ruffling his daughter's hair. Not everything, kiddo. Just most things. The three of them stood there for a moment, the rain pattering lightly around them. For Claire, it was a strange yet comforting scene. She hadn't expected kindness like this when she set out on her journey. Especially, not from complete strangers. And while she still felt wary about trusting anyone, there was something about Ethan and Lila that made her want to lower her guard. Even just a little. You hungry? Ethan asked suddenly, breaking the silence. We could grab some snacks and eat while I finish up here. Claire hesitated, then nodded. That sounds nice, thank you. And so they ended up sharing a makeshift meal inside the camper, peanut butter sandwiches and hot cocoa prepared on a portable stove. The warmth of the food, combined with Lila's cheerful chatter, created an atmosphere that felt almost magical. For the first time in days, Claire allowed herself to relax, laughing at Lila's jokes and exchanging stories about their lives. Though she remained vague about her own circumstances, Ethan didn't push her for details. Instead, he listened attentively, sensing that she needed space more than answers. By the time Ethan finished repairing the camper, the rain had stopped, leaving the world glistening with droplets of water. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting golden rays over the hills. As Claire climbed back into the driver's seat, she turned to Ethan with a grateful smile. I can't thank you enough, she said sincerely. You saved me today. Ethan shrugged modestly. Just glad I could help. Safe travels, Claire. As she drove away, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this mysterious woman than met the eye. Little did he know, their paths were far from finished crossing, and that this chance encounter would change both their lives in ways neither of them could imagine. The days that followed Claire's departure were quiet and uneventful, at least on the surface. Ethan returned to his routine of work and parenting, while Lila went back to her usual antics, riding her bike through puddles, chasing frogs by the creek, and pestering her dad with endless questions about everything under the sun. But for Ethan, something had shifted. The brief encounter with Claire lingered in his mind like a half-forgotten melody, one he couldn't quite shake off no matter how hard he tried. It wasn't just her mysterious demeanor or the guarded look in her eyes that stayed with him. It was the way she had softened around Lila. He remembered how Claire's tense posture had relaxed as Lila chattered away, how her smile had become genuine when she laughed at the little girl's jokes. There was a vulnerability in Claire that Ethan hadn't expected, a crack in her polished exterior that hinted at a deeper story. And though he didn't know much about her, he found himself wondering where she was now and whether she'd managed to get wherever she was going safely. Meanwhile, life in their small town carried on as usual. The leaves on the trees turned golden and red as autumn settled in, painting the landscape with vibrant colors. At the repair shop, Ethan fixed tractors, trucks, and cars, listening to customers talk about the upcoming harvest festival and other local events. Lila was thrilled about the festival. She loved the idea of hay rides, pumpkin patches, and caramel apples. She begged Ethan to take her every year, and this time was no different. Can we go, Dad? Please? She pleaded one evening as they sat together at the kitchen table finishing dinner. Ethan chuckled, wiping his hands on a napkin. Of course we can, kiddo. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Lila beamed, her excitement lighting up the room. Do you think Claire will come too? The question caught Ethan off guard. Claire? He repeated, raising an eyebrow. Why would she come here? Well, Lila shrugged, twirling a strand of her blonde hair. She seemed nice. I thought maybe she'd want to see us again. Ethan smiled softly, touched by his daughter's innocence. I'm sure she has her own plans, sweetheart. She's probably far away by now. But even as he said the words, a part of him wondered if Lila might be right. Was it possible that Claire would return? And if she did, what would bring her back to their tiny corner of the world? 2 days later, Ethan got his answer, or at least part of it. It was late afternoon, and he was working on a pickup truck at the garage when he heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside. Glancing up, he saw a familiar camper pulling into the lot. His heart skipped a beat as the door opened, and out stepped Claire. She looked different this time, not because of her appearance, which was still casual but put together, but because of the exhaustion etched into her face. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and there were dark circles under her eyes as though she hadn't slept properly in days. Yet despite her weary state, she greeted him with a small, hesitant smile. "Hey," she said, walking over to where he stood. "I hope it's okay that I came back." Ethan set down his wrench and wiped his hands on a rag. "Of course it's okay. What brings you here?" Claire hesitated, glancing around the garage before lowering her voice. I didn't get very far," she admitted. "My engine started acting up again, and I realized I couldn't risk driving until it's fixed properly. Plus," she paused, biting her lip, "I didn't really have anywhere else to go." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Ethan studied her for a moment, sensing that she was holding something back. But instead of prying, he nodded understandingly. "Well, you're welcome to stay as long as you need. We've got plenty of space." Claire's relief was palpable. "Thank you," she murmured. "I don't know what I'd do without your help." Over the next few hours, Ethan focused on repairing the camper once more. This time, however, Claire didn't stay cooped up inside. Instead, she hovered nearby, watching him work with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. Occasionally, she asked questions about what he was doing, and Ethan patiently explained each step, happy to share his knowledge. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the garage, Lila arrived on her bike, having been sent by Ethan's co-worker to fetch him for supper. When she spotted Claire, her face lit up with delight. "You came back," she exclaimed, rushing over to hug the woman impulsively. Claire laughed, kneeling down to hug Lila back. "I did. Did you miss me?" "Yes," Lila replied without hesitation. "We were talking about you yesterday. Dad said you were probably far away, but I knew you'd come back." Ethan rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "Don't listen to her, Claire. She's got a wild imagination." Claire smiled, her expression softening as she looked at the two of them. "Maybe she's smarter than both of us." That night, after Ethan finished fixing the camper, they decided to have dinner together at his house. Claire insisted on helping, chopping vegetables and setting the table while Ethan cooked a simple meal of spaghetti and garlic bread. The cozy atmosphere of the small kitchen seemed to loosen Claire's defenses further, and she began opening up more than she had before. "Used to love cooking," she confessed as she stirred a pot of sauce. "But lately I haven't had much time for it." "Work keeping you busy?" Ethan asked casually. Claire hesitated, then nodded. "Something like that." Though she avoided specifics, Ethan noticed the way her hands trembled slightly as she spoke, as though the weight of whatever she was running from pressed heavily on her shoulders. He wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but he also knew better than to push someone who clearly needed space. Instead, he changed the subject, turning the conversation toward lighter topics. They talked about books, movies, and music, discovering shared interests that surprised them both. Claire revealed that she enjoyed hiking and photography, passions that aligned perfectly with the natural beauty of Ethan's hometown. Lila chimed in enthusiastically, suggesting places Claire should visit and promising to show her the best spots for skipping stones in the creek. By the end of the evening, the three of them felt like old friends rather than near strangers. As Claire helped clear the dishes, she glanced at Ethan and Lila with a look of gratitude that went beyond mere politeness. "You two are amazing," she said quietly. "I don't think I've ever met people like you." Ethan grinned, brushing off the compliment. "Nah, we're just regular folks trying to get by. You're the interesting one." Claire shook her head, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Maybe. But sometimes regular is exactly what someone needs. Over the next few days, Claire became a regular presence in Ethan and Lila's lives. She helped Ethan with odd jobs around the house, mending fences and painting the porch railing. In return, Ethan taught her basic car maintenance, showing her how to check oil levels and change a tire. Lila, meanwhile, took it upon herself to introduce Claire to all her favorite activities. They spent afternoons exploring the woods, building forts out of fallen branches and racing each other on bikes. For Claire, it was a side of life she hadn't experienced in years, if ever. Growing up in a world of privilege and constant scrutiny, she had always been surrounded by luxury but rarely by genuine connection. Here, in this small town, she found a simplicity and warmth that filled a void she hadn't realized existed. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe, not just physically but emotionally. Yet despite the comfort she found, Claire knew she couldn't stay forever. Every now and then, she would glance at her phone, checking for messages or updates. Each time her expression grew darker, as though reminders of her past life were closing in on her. Ethan noticed these moments but chose not to comment, respecting her need for privacy. One evening, as they sat together on the front porch watching the sunset, Claire finally spoke about what had been weighing on her mind. "I'm grateful for everything you've done for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't keep hiding forever. Sooner or later I'll have to face what I'm running from." Ethan nodded, his gaze steady. "When that time comes, we'll be here for you. Whatever you need." Claire looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Why are you so kind to me?" Ethan shrugged, offering a lopsided smile. "Because kindness doesn't cost a thing, and because you deserve it." In that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't romantic, not yet anyway, but it was undeniable, a bond forged in trust and mutual respect. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Claire realized that she had found more than refuge in this little town. She had found a family, one that reminded her of the person she used to be and perhaps the person she could still become. As the days turned into weeks, Claire's presence in Ethan and Lila's life became more than just a temporary arrangement. It felt natural, almost as if she had always belonged there. She started waking up early to help Ethan with chores around the house, learning the rhythm of his daily routine. By mid-morning, she'd often find herself sitting at the kitchen table with Lila, helping the little girl practice math problems or teaching her how to sketch animals using simple shapes. The bond between them grew stronger each day, and it wasn't uncommon to hear their laughter echoing through the halls. For Ethan, having Claire around was both comforting and slightly unsettling. On one hand, her kindness and willingness to pitch in made life easier. She fixed things Ethan hadn't realized were broken: the squeaky door hinge, the leaky faucet, even the old laptop that he used for work orders. Her resourcefulness amazed him, and he often joked that she was too good to be true. But on the other hand, there was still an air of mystery about her. No matter how much they talked or laughed together, Claire never fully opened up about why she was really there, or who she was running from. One chilly morning, while Ethan was busy repairing a tractor at the garage, Claire decided to take Lila on a hike through the woods behind their house. It was something Lila had been begging to do for days, and Claire finally gave in, eager to spend some time outdoors herself. As they walked along the narrow trail, surrounded by towering trees and the sound of rustling leaves, Lila skipped ahead, pointing out squirrels and birds. "You're really good at this," Claire said, watching Lila climb over a fallen log with ease. "Do you go hiking a lot?" "Not really," Lila replied, brushing dirt off her hands. "Dad says we don't have time for stuff like this because he works so much, but I think it's fun." Claire smiled, though her expression turned thoughtful. "Your dad works hard, doesn't he?" Lila nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, but he's the best dad ever. He fixes everything: cars, bikes, toys, even me when I fall down." Claire chuckled softly. "Sounds like he's pretty amazing." "He is," Lila agreed, then tilted her head curiously. "What about your dad? Is he nice too?" The question caught Claire off guard. For a moment she hesitated, unsure how to answer. Her relationship with her father was complicated, to say the least. He had been distant during her childhood, consumed by his business empire and rarely present for birthdays or holidays. Even now, years after his passing, she still carried the weight of those unspoken words, the things they'd never had the chance to say to each other. He tried his best, Claire said finally, choosing her words carefully. But sometimes, people get caught up in their work and they forget what's important. Lila frowned, clearly sensing the sadness in Claire's voice. That's sad. I'm glad my dad isn't like that. So am I, Claire murmured, ruffling Lila's hair affectionately. You're lucky to have him. When they returned home later that afternoon, Ethan was already back from the garage, tinkering with an old lawnmower in the backyard. Seeing them approach, he waved and called out, "How was the hike?" "It was awesome," Lila exclaimed, running over to show him a pine cone she'd found. "Look what I got." Ethan examined the pine cone with exaggerated interest. "Wow, that's impressive. Did you find any treasure chests too?" Lila giggled. "No, but Claire taught me how to climb logs without falling. She's super smart." Ethan glanced at Claire, who was standing a few feet away, smiling faintly. "Well, I guess I'll have to start calling her Professor Claire from now on." Claire rolled her eyes playfully. "Don't push your luck, Carter." Their banter was interrupted by the sound of Ethan's phone buzzing on the picnic table. He picked it up, glancing at the screen before frowning. "Huh. That's weird." "What is it?" Claire asked, stepping closer. "It's an email alert from my coworker," Ethan explained. "He said someone left a flyer at the shop asking about a missing camper. Said it matches the description of yours." Claire froze, her smile vanishing instantly. "What does it say exactly?" Ethan scanned the message quickly. "Just that the owner reported it stolen last week. They're offering a reward for information." Claire's face paled and she took a step back, panic flickering in her eyes. "Stolen? That's impossible. This camper belongs to me. Why would anyone—" She stopped abruptly, realization dawning on her face. Someone must have reported it stolen to track her movements. Whoever was looking for her wasn't giving up easily. Ethan noticed the shift in her demeanor immediately. Setting the phone down, he crossed the distance between them and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Hey, whatever's going on, we'll figure it out, okay?" Claire swallowed hard, nodding weakly. I need to tell you something." They moved inside, settling at the kitchen table while Lila played quietly in the living room. Claire hesitated, her fingers twisting nervously around the edge of her sweater. Finally, she took a deep breath and began speaking. "My name isn't just Claire," she admitted. "It's Claire Kensington. My family owns one of the largest tech companies in the world. A few months ago, someone leaked confidential documents implicating me in a corporate scandal, except—" She paused, her voice trembling. "Except, I didn't do it, someone set me up." Ethan listened intently, his brow furrowing as the pieces fell into place. "Is that why you're here? To hide?" Claire nodded. "I needed to disappear until I could prove my innocence, but now it seems like they've tracked me down anyway." Ethan leaned back in his chair, processing everything she'd said. "Who are they?" "I don't know for sure," Claire admitted. "Could be reporters, competitors, or even people within my own company. All I know is that if they find me, they'll drag me back into that nightmare. And this time I might not come out of it." The weight of her confession hung heavy in the air. Ethan wanted to reassure her, to promise that nothing bad would happen, but he knew better than to make promises he couldn't keep. Instead, he reached across the table and squeezed her hand gently. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "We'll protect you, no matter what." Claire looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." "Because you're not just some stranger anymore," Ethan replied. "You're part of our lives now, and we look out for each other." Over the next few days, Ethan and Claire worked together to strengthen their defenses. They parked the camper in the barn, hidden from view, and covered it with tarps to make it less conspicuous. Claire stayed indoors most of the time, venturing outside only when absolutely necessary. Meanwhile, Ethan kept an eye out for anything suspicious. A strange car driving past their house, unfamiliar faces in town or unusual activity at the garage. Despite the tension, moments of normalcy persisted. Lila continued to treat Claire like a big sister, drawing pictures for her and insisting she read bedtime stories every night. One evening, as they sat together on the couch flipping through a book of fairy tales, Lila suddenly looked up at Claire, with wide, serious eyes. "Are you a princess?" she asked. Claire blinked, caught off guard by the question. "What makes you think that?" "You act like one," Lila said matter-of-factly. "Princesses are brave and kind, and they fight. Dragons. You're fighting your own dragon right now, aren't you?" Claire stared at her, momentarily speechless. Then slowly she smiled. "Yeah, I guess I am." "Well, don't worry," Lila declared confidently. "My dad and I will help you slay it." For the first time in weeks, Claire felt a spark of hope. Maybe she wasn't alone in this battle after all. With Ethan and Lila by her side, she began to believe that she might actually stand a chance against the forces trying to bring her down. But as the days passed, it became clear that the danger wasn't far behind. Late one night, as Ethan and Claire sat talking quietly in the kitchen, headlights swept across the windows, illuminating the room briefly before disappearing. Both of them froze, exchanging worried glances. "They're here," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan stood up, determination etched into his features. "Stay here. I'll handle this." "No," Claire said sharply, grabbing his arm. "Whatever happens, we face it together." And for the first time since arriving in the small town, Claire felt truly ready to confront the storm waiting outside. The headlights lingered just beyond the edge of Ethan's property, casting long shadows through the trees. The car hadn't moved for several minutes, but its presence was enough to send a chill down Claire's spine. She stood frozen in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter as her mind raced. Who were they? Reporters? Corporate rivals? Or worse, someone sent by whoever framed her? Ethan, on the other hand, remained calm. He turned off all the lights in the house, plunging the room into darkness except for the faint glow of the moon filtering through the curtains. "Stay here," he whispered again, his voice firm but gentle. Then, grabbing a flashlight from the drawer, he headed toward the front door. "No," Claire hissed, following him despite his earlier warning. "You can't go out there alone." Ethan paused, glancing back at her. There was no time to argue. Instead, he handed her the flashlight. "Fine, but stay behind me, okay? And if anything happens, you take Lila and run." Claire nodded reluctantly, her heart pounding as they stepped outside. The cool night air bit at their skin, and the only sounds were the rustling leaves and the distant hum of crickets. They crept along the side of the house, staying close to the shadows, until they reached the driveway where Ethan's truck was parked. From this angle, they could see the mysterious car more clearly. It was sleek and black, with tinted windows. That made it impossible to tell who was inside. Suddenly, the engine roared to life, and the car began rolling forward slowly, headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Ethan instinctively pulled Claire back against the wall of the garage, shielding her with his body. For a moment, it seemed like the car might drive past without stopping, but then it came to a halt right in front of the barn. "They know," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. "They must have seen the camper." Before Ethan could respond, two figures emerged from the car. Both were dressed in dark suits, their faces obscured by the brims of their hats. One carried what looked like a clipboard, while the other held a flashlight, scanning the area methodically. "Looks abandoned," one of them muttered, his voice low but audible. "Doesn't mean she isn't here," the second replied gruffly. "Let's check the barn." Ethan tightened his grip on Claire's arm, silently urging her to stay still. His mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. If these men found the camper, or worse, discovered Claire hiding in the house, it could end badly for all of them. He needed to distract them somehow, buy some time to figure out their next move. "Wait here," he murmured, pressing Claire gently against the wall before slipping away into the shadows. Moving as quietly as possible, he circled around to the far side of the barn, where he grabbed a loose plank of wood lying nearby. With a deep breath, he hurled it into the woods, creating a loud crash that echoed through the night. "What was that?" one of the men barked, spinning toward the sound. "Probably an animal," the other said dismissively, though he hesitated, shining his flashlight in the direction of the noise. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan darted across the yard and positioned himself between the intruders and the house. When the first man finally turned back toward the barn, Ethan stepped into the open, raising his hand slightly to show he wasn't armed. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he called out, his tone casual but firm. Both men froze, their flashlights trained on him. "Who are you?" the taller one demanded. "I live here," Ethan replied evenly. "And you're trespassing on private property." The shorter man snorted. "We're looking for someone. A woman. Seen anyone unusual around here lately?" Ethan shook his head. "Just me and my daughter. We keep to ourselves." The taller man narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Mind if we take a look around?" "You don't have a warrant," Ethan shot back, crossing his arms. "So yeah, I do mind." For a moment, neither man moved. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, the shorter man shrugged. "Not worth the trouble. Let's go." As they climbed back into their car and drove off, Ethan let out a shaky breath, his shoulders sagging with relief. But he didn't relax completely. Not yet. Once the taillights disappeared down the road, he hurried back to Claire, who was still crouched beside the garage. "They're gone," he assured her, helping her to her feet. "But they'll be back. We need to move the camper tonight." By dawn, the camper was safely hidden in a secluded grove deep in the woods, accessible only by a narrow dirt path that even locals rarely used. Ethan had spent hours driving it there under the cover of darkness, while Claire stayed behind to watch over Lila. Though exhausted, both of them felt a small sense of accomplishment. They'd managed to stay one step ahead of whoever was hunting. Claire. Over breakfast the next morning, Claire broached a topic she'd been avoiding since arriving in town. "I need to clear my name," she said quietly, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "Hiding won't solve anything." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "Do you have any leads? Any idea who set you up?" Claire hesitated, then sighed. "There's someone I trust, a former colleague named Marcus. He worked closely with me before the scandal broke. If anyone knows what really happened, it's him." "Then we should contact him," Ethan said firmly. "But not directly. We'll need to be careful." Together they devised a plan. Using Ethan's old laptop, which Claire expertly encrypted to prevent tracking, they drafted an anonymous email to Marcus. In it, Claire explained the situation without revealing too much, asking him to meet her at a neutral location far from town. To ensure his safety and theirs, she included a code phrase only Marcus would recognize. After sending the email, they waited anxiously for a response. Days passed with no word, and Claire began to fear the worst. Had Marcus been compromised? Was he part of the conspiracy against her? Just when hope seemed lost, a reply finally arrived late one evening. It was short and cryptic. "Meet me tomorrow. At noon. Bring proof." The meeting took place in a quiet park 2 towns over, far enough to avoid suspicion but close enough to reach within a few hours. Ethan insisted on going with Claire, refusing to let her face the unknown alone. They left Lila with a trusted neighbor, promising to return by dinner time. When they arrived, Marcus was already waiting on a bench near the playground. He was tall and lanky, with glasses perched on his nose and a nervous energy about him. As soon as he saw Claire, his face lit up with relief. "Thank God you're alive," he said, pulling her into a quick hug. "I thought they'd gotten to you." "Who's they?" Claire asked sharply, sitting down beside him. Marcus glanced around furtively before lowering his voice. "Your Uncle Robert. He orchestrated the whole thing. The leaks, the accusations, everything. He wants control of the company, and framing you was his way of getting rid of competition." Claire stared at him, stunned. Her Uncle Robert had always been ambitious, but she never imagined he'd stoop so low. "Do you have evidence?" she asked after a moment. Marcus nodded, pulling a USB drive from his pocket. "Everything's on here. Emails, financial records, the works. Enough to expose him and clear your name." Claire accepted the drive with trembling hands, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I owe you everything." Marcus smiled weakly. "Just promise me one thing, don't let him win." She nodded fiercely. "I won't." Returning home that night, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. With the evidence in hand, she knew the battle was far from over, but for the first time in months, she dared to believe she might emerge victorious. As they pulled into the driveway, Ethan glanced at her, his expression softening. "You ready for this?" he asked. Claire met his gaze, determination burning in her eyes. More than ever. And as they walked into the house together, hand in hand, neither of them realized how much their lives were about to change, for better or worse. The days that followed Claire's meeting with Marcus were a blur of preparation and anticipation. Armed with the USB drive containing the evidence needed to expose her Uncle Robert, Claire worked tirelessly alongside Ethan to devise a plan. They knew they couldn't simply hand over the information. They had to ensure it reached the right people without putting themselves or anyone else in danger. It was a delicate balancing act, one that required precision, trust, and a little bit of luck. Ethan transformed his garage into an impromptu command center. With Claire's guidance, he set up a secure laptop connected to a private network she'd created using advanced encryption software. Together, they sifted through the files on the USB drive, organizing emails, financial records, and internal memos that painted a damning picture of Robert's scheme. Each document they uncovered added another layer to the web of deceit he had woven, implicating not only him, but also several high-ranking executives within the company who had conspired with him. As they worked, Lila flitted in and out of the garage, curious about what they were doing but respectful enough to stay out of the way. Occasionally she would sit quietly on a stool, watching Claire type furiously or listening as Ethan explained how certain pieces of evidence fit together. Though she didn't fully understand the gravity of the situation, she sensed its importance and took pride in being part of their team. "Are you going to win?" she asked one evening, tugging on Claire's sleeve as they prepared dinner. Claire smiled, crouching down to meet her eye level. "I hope so, sweetheart. But no matter what happens, I want you to know how much your dad and I appreciate having you by our side." Lila beamed at this, hugging Claire tightly before skipping off to set the table. Watching her go, Ethan chuckled softly. "She really loves you, you know." "I love her too," Claire replied, her voice tinged with emotion. "Both of you." Their moment was interrupted by the sound of Ethan's phone buzzing on the counter. He picked it up, frowning as he read the message. "It's Marcus," he said after a moment. "He says there's been increased activity around the corporate offices, meetings, late at night, executives coming and going at odd hours. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon." Claire nodded grimly. "Then we need to act fast." The next morning they finalized their strategy. Instead of releasing the evidence directly to the media, a move that could backfire if mishandled, they decided to send it anonymously to a trusted investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. Claire drafted a detailed letter explaining the context behind the documents, emphasizing her innocence and Robert's role in orchestrating the scandal. She signed it simply as a friend of truth. Before sending the email, Claire hesitated, glancing at Ethan. "This is it," she said quietly. "Once we hit send, there's no turning back." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got this, Claire. We've got this." With a deep breath, Claire clicked the button. The email disappeared into cyberspace, leaving them in tense silence as they waited for the fallout. Within 48 hours, the story broke. Headlines blared across news outlets worldwide. "Billionaire heiress framed in corporate conspiracy." Reporters swarmed outside Claire's family estate, demanding statements from Robert and other implicated executives. Meanwhile, investigators descended on the company headquarters, seizing computers and files as evidence. By the end of the week, Robert had been arrested, along with several of his co-conspirators. Their elaborate scheme unraveled under public scrutiny, leaving Claire's name cleared and her reputation restored. For Claire, the victory was bittersweet. While she felt immense relief at finally being vindicated, she couldn't shake the sadness of knowing her own family had betrayed her. Still, she resolved to rebuild, not just her career, but her life. And she knew exactly where to start. 1. Sunny afternoon as Ethan tinkered with a motorcycle at the garage, a sleek black car pulled into the lot. Out stepped Claire, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed confidence and power. Yet despite her polished appearance, her smile was warm and genuine as she approached him. "Hey, stranger," she said, leaning against the workbench. "How's business?" Ethan grinned, wiping grease-stained hands on a rag. "Not bad. What brings you here? Shouldn't you be out celebrating your big win?" Claire shrugged, her gaze softening. "There'll be time for that later. Right now, I wanted to thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me," Ethan replied, shaking his head. "We did this together. And I'll never forget it," Claire said earnestly. Then, after a pause, she added, "Actually, I came to ask you something. How would you feel about expanding your garage? Maybe turning it into a full-service auto repair shop? I can help fund it if you're interested." Ethan blinked, surprised by the offer. "Are you serious?" "Completely," Claire said with a laugh. "You've got talent, Ethan. You deserve more than fixing tractors for minimum wage. Besides, I owe you and Lila a lot." Ethan mulled it over for a moment before nodding slowly. "Okay, but only if you promise to stick around. I'm not letting you disappear again." Claire's smile widened, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Deal." Over the next few months, Ethan's garage underwent a transformation. With Claire's financial backing and strategic advice, it became the most popular repair shop in town, attracting customers from neighboring counties. Ethan hired additional staff, giving him more time to spend with Lila, who was thrilled to have both her dad and Claire around regularly. As for Claire, she found joy in the simplicity of small-town life. She purchased a modest house near Ethan's, allowing her to remain close to the family that had become her anchor during the darkest chapter of her life. On weekends, she joined them for hikes, picnics, and trips to the farmer's market. Slowly, but surely she began to heal, rediscovering parts of herself she thought she'd lost forever. One crisp autumn evening, as they sat together on Ethan's porch watching the sunset, Claire turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if I hadn't broken down on that road?" Ethan chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I think about it all the time, but honestly, I'm glad you did. You've changed our lives for the better." Claire leaned into him, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. "You've changed mine too." And as the golden light faded into twilight, casting long shadows across the yard, they sat in comfortable silence, knowing their bond was stronger than any obstacle life could throw their way. For Ethan, Claire, and Lila, the future wasn't just bright, it was filled with endless possibilities.